Jonathan Miller is a speaker, facilitator, and leadership coach specializing in working with high performers to be powerful in the face of conflict. His programs draw heavily from his extensive training in several communication systems, including Nonviolent Communication, the Harvard Negotiation Project, Landmark Worldwide, and more. I'm excited for you to hear from him, so let's cue the intro and jump right in. I've spent the last 20 years studying, teaching, and coaching people to find their greatness and take their lives to the next level. Along the way, it's become evident that emotions are at the root of everybody's successes and failures. Worry and fear are the enemies, and it's time to forge the armor and earn the tools to overcome the two things that could single-handedly destroy your future. Hi, my name is Michael Johnson, and I'm a life coach, a peak performance trainer, and I'm the emotions guy. It's time to take back control of how you feel, control of how you act, and control of how you experience life. It's time to become a lifer, a new breed of overachiever focused on living every minute to its fullest. We are responsible for how we feel, and no one and no thing can make us feel anything. Emotional mastery is our journey, and emotional education and intelligence is the key. We are lifers, and this is Magic for Life. What's up, lifers? Michael Johnson here with the Magic for Life podcast, and I'm excited that you joined me today because we have our very special guest, Jonathan Miller. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are so excited to have you here.
And I'm excited to be here.
We met a number of weeks back, and ever since I've been excited to do this interview and get you on so we could share your experience and your knowledge with our audience, and then hopefully help them to find themselves back to you with some of the amazing things that you do and that you offer. And so we'll talk about that at the end. But just to get our audience familiar with you and the things you've been up to and what you're doing, why don't you give us some of your backstory and tell us how you got to this point and what you're up to.
Well, my adventure really started in a 1984 GMC Vandura. And that is this old school van with a pop top. It's got a little kitchenette inside and a table and two benches that turn into a bed. And my partner, who's my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, so happy ending to the story, we had always wanted to go on this big road trip all around North America. And so for years we planned, we saved money. And when the day came where we wanted to set off, we quit our jobs. And a huge part of it was because I just wanted a break from the 9 to 5. I wanted to reassess, what am I doing with my life? I was in my late 20s, not digging my job a ton. And at the same time, I also wanted to know, well, who's this person that I potentially spending the rest of my life with? We were living together for about a year and, we'd been on vacation together, had a decent relationship, nothing out of the ordinary, the occasional bicker argument here, nothing crazy. So I didn't think it was anything I couldn't handle. And I wanted to see, was this the person? And I remember we set off, we were so excited, as anyone would be heading off on a year-long trip like that, right? And that excitement lasted for about 3 days. Because putting two full-size adults in a space smaller than a jail cell, you get up in each other's personal space, right?
Yeah. And
so all of a sudden, I had this relationship that I thought was pretty good, where now we were arguing and bickering more than I was used to. And it wasn't like any all-out fights or anything, but it was still uncomfortable and unfamiliar. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, is this what it's going to be like for the rest of the year? Like that's not going to be good. That's not going to be the trip that I necessarily want. And there was a moment where it really came to head, a pivotal moment. I was sitting in the van. I was chopping some vegetables. We were making some dinner. Laura, my partner, she was watching the stove. And in a moment, I said to her, hey, can you pass me that potato? And she turns around and she says, I'm doing something right now. Can't you see? Now, pause. This had actually happened already. Similar but different. Not exactly this potato snapping kind of thing. But it had happened a couple times where I maybe asked for something and I got this kind of remark. And the first couple of times, maybe I got defensive, maybe I just got really quiet, the usual responses, silence or violence to those kinds of situations. And this time I'm like, what's going on? What was that? And she said, I don't know. What was that? And so over dinner, we sat down and we really took a look at the situation. And so what we looked at was, I said, "Can you pass me the potato?" Well, what did she hear? Well, she heard, "Stop what you're doing and get me that potato immediately." That's not what I said, but that's what she heard. And we figured out it had to do with a bunch of assumptions and beliefs and her upbringing, all that kind of stuff. What I meant was, "Oh, well, whenever you have a moment, you can get me that potato, please." That's not what I said. I said, "Get me that potato," because I also had this context that I grew up in with, 3 siblings in the house, and you just say what it is that you need whenever you need it, and eventually it gets done. But I said, "Pass me that potato." And so we managed to track down this breakdown that we had here. And so we came up with a game plan. I said, "Okay, well, I'm going to say whenever you have a moment." That's my like new phrase that I'm saying. I'm going to say whenever you have a moment, either before or after, if I forget. And she's going to partner with me. She's going to cut me some slack. She's going to let me know. She's going to ask me for specifics, or, just cut me some slack, really. And lo and behold, within days, the problem disappeared. And I thought to myself, whoa, there is something about this communication stuff. There's something cool here. And I was surprised because I thought I knew a lot about communication. I mean, I've been communicating my whole life. Just like all of us, right? I worked in a workplace. I was a project manager at a really large company. I mean, I worked with dozens of people a day, tons of different functional teams. And, I got along with a lot of people. I was very friendly, outgoing. I was a good, great employee. So it was really easy to get along with people, except, of course, the difficult people. And they were the ones that were difficult. No, I was the one that was difficult. And that's what I learned. Because as I started to dive into this world of communication, I realized I was a pretty terrible communicator. I had a lot of unhelpful habits, we'll call them. I don't want to say terrible communicator. There are just ways that I could have communicated more effectively to actually get what I want. And I continued this practice. I continued learning and I continued practicing this stuff. Practice it with my wife, bless her. I hurt her feelings many times. Practice with people that I would meet on the road. And what came out of this year-long adventure was this new exceptional relationship with my partner. And when I got home, I noticed that it was impacting the relationships with my family, with my friends. And that's when I knew that this communication thing was going to be a huge part of my life. And then kind of from there, I figured out how that would become a part of my life.
Well, that's I don't even. There's so many parts of that that sort of just blow me away. First of all, how in the world do you even make the decision to go, "I'm going to quit my job and we're going to just travel around for a year"? Like that, getting to that spot right there in itself says volumes. But like, how did you guys decide that that was what you were going to do? Like, who quits their job and says, "I'm just going to travel around in a car for a year"? Like, that's just not normal, right? That's a little bit unusual. So how'd you guys get to that point?
Admittedly, the decision was a little bit easier for us. We actually talked about doing this van trip within a few months of us dating.
Oh
And
my gosh.
we met in like late 2013. We did this van trip in late 2015. The thing is that we have a hobby. We're really into rock climbing.
Uh,
And in the rock climbing community, it's actually very common to live in your van and go rock climbing. In fact, there were members of our like crew of friends who had already done van trips. And then once we got back, there were other people that were about to go on van trips. And this was before the whole van life thing. So I remember when we were even looking to buy one of these vans, they were actually previously owned by someone that we knew. She had already done a van trip for a year in this van, sold it to another couple, and then they were looking to sell it to us. So it wasn't like that outrageous of a thing. It's interesting that you say it's very unusual, because I think that just shows the power of our context,
yeah.
right? That context for us, it seemed like actually a super normal, really cool thing to do. Whereas, yeah, when we told people that we were going to do this, especially some of the people at work, yeah, definitely like, you're doing what? So that's how
Yeah.
it all started, kind of came to
And
me.
so you had planned to do this. So you had saved up your money and you were basically making it so that you could do this for the year. Did you like look beyond that as well and go, okay, when we get back, we'll try to pick up that same job, or we know what we're going to do when we get back? Or what did you think of in terms of post that year travel, or was it not on the mind yet?
We didn't have any specifics. We had an idea of the kind of, we'll call it a nest egg that we wanted to come home to. So, I mean, we were both working, like corporate like jobs. She was working in the nonprofit space. I was working in a large corporation. So, we saved up money. We were really diligent. We cooked all of our food at home. We didn't buy clothes unless we really needed them. Didn't buy the newest iPhones. And we knew that the trip would cost, like, we kind of estimated how much the trip would cost, and we knew definitely how much we wanted to come home with, just as like a landing place so that we could do other things. But part of the trip was to uncover what it is that we wanted to do. And yeah, my mind drifted to, oh, I guess I could go back to my old job, or I guess I could do that thing. The mind loves to be safe and secure. So I entertained a lot of those thoughts on that trip. That's for sure. I also know another couple that did a similar trip. They actually managed to go to their exact jobs as soon as they got back. So they knew they were going to their jobs when they got back. So any alternative is available. For us, it wasn't as on our mind. It was about the adventure. And we just had the safety net in terms of finances was what really allowed us the freedom to feel at ease with whatever decision we were going to make.
Well, and one of the things that stood out to me along the way is you told your story and your communication challenges of being in that sort of confined space. I think that happens a lot with a lot of people. Sometimes in work situations, they get into these confined spaces, and there are ramifications of it. I think in the coming days with this pandemic, and everybody being sort of separated apart, even just the idea of being separated 6 feet apart changes the way we communicate. And so I see that the thing you discovered in that situation and in your story that you just told us is those unhelpful habits. And I think what's going to happen in the recovery from this stay 6 feet apart from each other is everybody's going to have picked up these new habits of how to communicate, like away from each other, and then they're going to get back close and get into that space, and all of a sudden our communication bad habits are going to flare like crazy, and it's going to cause all sorts of problems. So what are your thoughts about that?
It could happen. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Some old habits die hard, and yeah, I bet that some people will be dealing with that for sure.
No doubt. Tell me about some of the unhelpful habits that you had mentioned, that you had learned about and that you've now experienced in working with other people and teaching them about how to identify them. So tell us a little bit more about that idea and what you discovered.
One of the ones that come to mind immediately, there's a few that were kind of some early on understandings of communication. The first, and one that's made a huge difference in my life, is understanding intentions versus impact. And what's really common is we tend to collapse the two when they're two very distinct things. In fact, what we often do in these difficult conversations with people is that we tend to focus on the intentions rather than the impact. So let me give you an example. I might I might be at work. Imagine a work situation where, well, let's think about an entrepreneurial situation, right? Maybe you are partnering with somebody, maybe you're collaborating with somebody, and one thing leads to another. You're working on this project and they end up running off on their own and taking a bunch of credit or taking a bunch of work that you ended up putting more time in than they did. Okay. And what we'll want to do is we'll want to have that difficult conversation, like what just happened here. And so what we'll focus on is their intentions instead of focusing on our impact. So I might say something like, it's like, why did you do that? You know, like, how could you? And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to assume a few things around their intentions. First, I'm going to assume that they had bad intentions, that they meant to hurt me. That's the first fallacy that I'm going to go ahead and assume around their intentions. I'm also going to assume that I know what their intentions are, which is a fallacy because I don't know what someone's intentions are. I can be right up against you. You and I, we can go like face to face and I can be like right up against you and I have no idea what you're thinking. And that's because intentions are invisible. You can't
Right.
see them. You can't touch an intention. So how could I possibly know someone's intention unless I asked? Also, another fallacy that I fall into often is that intentions are very complex. You know, maybe they didn't necessarily have bad intentions, but maybe they just weren't aware of what intentions they had. Maybe they had mixed intentions. Regardless, the odds of them having bad intentions are very small because we're all acting pretty rationally at all times. Now, that's not to say that there aren't people with bad intentions out there. Sure. But I want you and our listeners to consider that the vast majority of the time, where people are not operating with bad intentions. You can even reflect on yourself, how often you acted with bad intentions. I can't say I rarely, if ever, act with actually malicious intentions towards somebody, right? Now, what I can speak to in a conversation that's much more effective is impact. I don't necessarily have to assume anything intentions. I might ask what their intentions are, which will probably help me feel better. They might say something that I didn't even think of and go, oh, actually, that seems pretty reasonable. But I can talk about, well, I really felt hurt because of that. I really felt like, you know, you went off with that thing. I felt hurt. And it was kind of like, for me, it was like, it's kind of like a betrayal for me. So that is talking about the impact. That makes the difference, not intentions. Intentions would only put the other person on defense. Impact actually shares from one's own perspective. So that's one huge thing I learned. Another thing that comes to mind is just around blame. Don't blame. Stop blaming. Never blame. Blame is never, ever, 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 ever the answer. It's just so unhelpful for any conversation you're trying to have. If you want to have a productive conversation, please don't blame. And another perspective that one can look at instead of blame is looking at contribution. So taking that same example of a partnership, one might be tempted to blame the other person. I would say, you know, I can't believe you went off and did this, da 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 da. If somebody told me that and they said, I can't believe you did this and da 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 da. The thing is, especially if they're wrong about my intentions, especially if they're wrong in their blame, I mean, I am going to defend for my life. I'm going to defend for my life because they are pointing their finger at me and then all of a sudden I become a victim, a wrongfully accused victim. So I'm going to defend with everything I've got. And I'm definitely not going to listen to what they have to say. Instead, going in and talking about contribution, talking about more an ownership perspective. I mean, we're talking, I mean, you're teaching like a mindset workshop. We're talking about that kind of stuff. Talk about a powerful mindset to have when you're the creator, when you're the owner, when you take full responsibility. I mean, there's no room for blame. And so instead of talking about something like contribution, asking, well, okay, how did you contribute to it? But how did I also contribute to the situation? Maybe I didn't make my boundaries clear enough. Maybe I didn't show up to enough meetings. What did I do that contributed to the situation? Not saying it's entirely my fault, but just looking at all sides of the story. Those are two lessons that come to mind that I learned pretty early on that already started shifting how I was communicating and how I was thinking about the interactions I was being in.
Oh my gosh. I mean, there's so much. You're so awesome. I love the guys. If you're listening to this right now, go back and rewind and listen to that like 3 more times at least. There's just so much in that, and there's so many awesome things that you're saying, and just I can't agree with you more about the intention side of things. Like people just generally don't operate out of bad intention, and again, of course, there are people that are not nice. right, and evil in the world. But I agree with you. I mean, generally people have a good intention for what they're doing, and it might not align with your good intention, but it certainly is their intention. Tell me a little bit about you were talking about when that time didn't work out uh, with your now wife, and you were starting to learn about these unhelpful habits. Did you find during that year that there were times that more times than that everything didn't work out, or was it like that was like a one-time incident and then it was like, okay, we figured this out, now we're good to go? Or was it like, okay, we had to keep like figuring this out over the whole year?
The conflicts have not stopped even to this day. So
Sure.
that was 5 years ago. I mean, conflict is, if you're in relation with another human, there's going to be conflict. You know, we can talk about conflict on a really minor scale. You know, you and I might be like, hey, man, like, where do you want to go for dinner tonight? What do you want to get?
uh, Cajun seafood.
Cajun seafood. Cool. I don't know if I feel like Cajun seafood. What about Thai food?
uh,
And right there, there's a conflict because maybe we like disagree,
sure.
right? But that's pretty easy to resolve because then we might be like, oh, but like, what about burgers? Oh, I love burgers. Okay. And then it's done. So like
Right.
that conflict is resolved very easily. And that stuff happens all the time.
Yeah.
Maybe in a little micro moment, but also, the ones that we're more familiar with, that drama that enters our lives, that larger scale conflict, right? So that conflict never disappears. So we had that conflict in our relationship in the van, and we had more conflicts throughout the trip. We had conflicts after the trip and all the way until now. Now, what's changed, what's shifted is our ability to handle that conflict very effectively and turn that conflict into creative solutions rather than drama. So I want to give you a couple of examples of what that might look like. In fact, actually, before we dive into examples, okay? Actually, no, let's dive into examples. This is going to be great, okay? Here's one alternative with conflict. Now, I remember we were doing some travel in India. This is a ridiculous story, but I'm going to tell it anyway. We were doing some travel in India. I was like really interested in yoga. I thought it was great. And my wife, she did this yoga teacher training, and we're like, yo, let's go live in an ashram. That would be so cool. We can do yoga every day and like really live the yoga lifestyle for like a week. That would be super cool. It'd be like this really unique experience. Let's just try it out. So we got there and we got into our rooms and we go to the first day of class. It starts at like 6 a.m. It's still dark out. And we do some of the morning stuff. And I'm like, all right, this is okay. Let's just see how the day goes. And the day goes on and there's like lots of this chanting and some more chanting. And all in all, this day went by and I didn't really like it that much, actually. And then the next day came and it was the exact same thing. And what I realized was that this ashram that we had paid to, be at for the week, it was actually like this like super, super traditional ashram. And listen, there were people who were doing the program with us. They loved it. I was not into it. I was just not into it. And the thing is, it caused a lot of conflict between my partner and I because she wanted to just go with the flow and I was just not having any of it. And that conflict, what ended up happening was a yelling match. That's what resulted from it. Okay. So the conflict was there and it turned into a yelling match. That's your classic case of drama. We ended up yelling at each other very briefly. She kind of stormed out of the room, saw her a couple hours later, kiss and make up, the yada, yada, the usual kind of thing that maybe you've seen or you've experienced in your life before. Now, let me talk about what's happened since we've done a lot of this communication work. We're recording this. It's the end of July 2020. I landed here in Cape Town, South Africa in January 2020. So I'm originally from Toronto, moved to Cape Town, South Africa to work on some cool projects here. And within the first few days, there was some tension brewing in our relationship. That's because we just transitioned to a new continent, nonetheless a new country. And there was a lot to navigate. Transitions are hard. I'm sure like transitions are just like they're challenging things to navigate. Lots of unknowns, lots of uncertainty. The brains, us humans, we don't like that stuff. So we're figuring out, well, how do we run our business from a different time zone? How do we stay in touch with friends and family? How do we navigate the grocery situation? Where do we do our workouts? Oh, I really want to go out and explore the city, but we have to navigate in this small space. She's also coach. Who's going to talk when? Oh, we'd come up with the situation where like I was ready to have dinner and she had a coaching call. Okay, well that doesn't work because now I can't eat dinner together. I have to make it alone. Whatever it is, there was tension brewing, and it went on for like a day or two at most. And there was just a point where I don't remember who it was, but we're like, okay, this has got to stop. And we literally put a meeting in our calendar, and we're like, we got to talk about what's going on here. Why is there tension here? Why is there like bickering coming up between us? And when we had the meeting, we uncovered that it was because we were not scheduling. We were having these scheduling conflicts. That was at the root of our challenges. And so we came up with this like structure. And this is going to sound a little silly, but it was like a really big deal for us. Okay. We agreed that every morning, we wake up, we have our little routine, we go to the bathroom, we do a little meditation, and then we sit down and we look at our calendars together every day.
Nice.
5-10 minutes, really quick.
Yeah.
We look at our calendar for the day. We also look at it for the next couple days just to get an idea of any conflicts coming up. And that's it. It has now been 6 months since we have put that structure in place. And I literally can't imagine living my life without that structure. And here you have an amazing opportunity here where we had a conflict. And what it created was this new creative solution that literally would not have existed had we not had that conflict. So all of a sudden, 2 instances of conflict, one that turned into a drama and one that turned into a creative solution. And so the insight here is that conflict in and of itself is not good or bad. It's actually a completely normal, natural part of life. It's the outcomes that conflict produces that are things that we would deem as good or bad, right or wrong, et cetera, et cetera. So I know I've been on a bit of a tangent here. I don't remember what the initial question is, but I think I want that to be the big insight that I had, and I'd love to share with everyone. That conflict is something that you can lean into, because from conflict, depending on how you manage it, you can actually create some really amazing stuff with another person, or even by yourself if you're having an internal conflict as well.
Right. And with this conflict resolution, conflict, and learning how to communicate through your conflicts, it implies this idea that the quality of our life is clearly related to the quality of our ability to communicate, whether it be outside or whether it be inside in our self-talk. So what kind of things do you do and say to yourself from an internal self-talk and an internal communication perspective that help you to mitigate or lessen the amount of conflicts you have outside?
That's a really great question. And the reason I think that's such a great question is because there's a lot. There's a lot of experiences, mindset shifts, perspectives, paradigm shifts that I've explored over the years that have gotten me to this place. So to pinpoint some of those things is going to be challenging, but there are a few things that I do want to put forward that have made a difference in my ability to handle conflict, to communicate, which ultimately enriches those relationships and then enriches my life. The first thing is, above all, is integrity. Integrity. Walking my talk. That integrity is the root of confidence. It's the root of authenticity. It's the root of trust in others and oneself. And when I'm not being integral, I know when I'm not being integral. I may not say it, but I know deep down that I'm not being in integrity with my values, with who I say I am. I know. And so that, for me, number one thing, that's my top value is integrity. Is living in a life of integrity, in my opinion, is the best life to live, is such an honorable life to live. And that is what has instilled me with the most confidence that I've experienced in my life. So that I would say is the number one thing that has made a difference for me. In terms of other things, there's just other assumptions that I've taken on, like a perspective, and that have worked out really well for me. So a perspective that everyone on earth is entirely, completely, 100% rational. Everyone's rational. Just try on the perspective that everyone is rational. I was at lunch with a friend of mine, and we started talking about how we manage our budgets with our partners. And he was telling me how I said that I have this like a shared, like, well, now we're married, so we have like everything that's like shared. But while we were dating, like we had a shared credit card. And anytime there was like expenses that had to do with like our rent or like our house or whatever, it was like a shared expense. We just put it on the shared credit card. And then every month, we'd like pay off half of it each. Pretty simple. It made a lot of sense to me. Now, this guy was also married, and he did not operate like that. In fact, they had their own bank accounts and their own budgets, and they had a little shared pot that they put into each month. And it perplexed me, because I'm like, wait a minute, like, you're married to this person. Like, doesn't that mean if like the other person makes more money that they get to like spend more? And he's like, yeah, absolutely. And just for whatever reason, it was beyond my comprehension. But when I asked questions, when we started actually exploring how he got to that point, it actually made perfect sense. And it's because, he had a past that had troubling money issues. And then he got, he was dating this girl for a long time. And, this is completely anonymous, so I'm just going to tell the story. But like, she had a problem with spending. And she had actually accrued a large debt that he didn't know about. And it just betrayed his trust. And so now the two of them, now she has this massive debt she's accrued, tens of thousands of dollars, all the while she was getting coffees and going out for drinks with people. And so, yeah, that makes sense. I think that I would have handled the situation very much similarly. He has it that she should pay off her debt, and then he gets to spend his money how he wants. And together they have some shared expenses. So at the time, what I want to illustrate with this story is that this guy seemed completely illogical, completely unreasonable to me, but really in his world, it made perfect sense why he was thinking that way. And it just goes to I want to illustrate again this point that we're all rational. No matter how illogical some people seem, consider that in their worlds, in their head, it makes perfect sense. Just like you and I and our listeners, right? We all why would I do something irrational? Why would I do something illogical? That doesn't make any sense. I would never do that. Maybe in hindsight, I've done that,
Right.
But I would never deliberately go, well, this doesn't make sense. I think I'm going to do this third best option I have here rather than my best option. So that's a powerful mindset to take in. That's made a huge difference for me in not only showing myself some compassion, but showing everyone else around me as well.
That's awesome. I'm taking notes, so sorry I missed it. and I think that's so cool. That last thing you said, people will take their best rational option. They're not going to choose their third best option. They're going to choose what they believe is their first best option from their perspective and their experiences. And
what's available to them in that present moment within their present awareness. Just the other week, I have this bathroom, I have this window that's open, and I walked into the bathroom and I look onto the ledge there, and there is some bird poo on the ledge right next to my mouth guard retainer thing. I know this is a ridiculous story, but hang in with me here. So I have one of those mouth guards I wear at night. Apparently I grind my teeth, so I'm taking care of that. So I got these fancy mouth guards, and there's just bird poo. And I called in my partner. We had a good laugh. I'm like, all right, well, let's clean this up. It landed uncomfortably close to it. So she says, hey, well, why don't you just boil it for a few minutes? You can sterilize it. And I'm like, great idea. And so I went and I, boiled some water. I dropped in the retainer in the case. I'm going to leave it for 3 minutes so that like sterilizes it really well, and then take it out. I leave for 3 minutes. The alarm goes off. I come back, and there is my retainer looking real weird because it melted. This like fancy retainer that I have, I've been using it for like a year, and it melted. Now, in that moment when it doesn't make any sense. Why would I do that? That's not how I clean this thing. Normally how I clean it is I use a toothbrush. I have these like fancy little tablets that clean retainers. That's what they're for. They're for sterilizing this thing. And in that moment, what was available in my awareness, it seemed like the best option was to boil it. Now, in hindsight, that doesn't make a lot of sense, but in that moment, it made perfect sense. And that's how we're always acting. We're always making those best decisions. I thought I'd throw in that extra story just to exemplify that.
I love that. Oh my gosh. There's so many times, I mean, you said that and I thought of like so many times came up to my mind and I just, oh my goodness, we've all done it. We've all done that. We all operate taking our best option. It's just, we don't always have the perspective to see that best option. And that's crazy. Well, I like to do something on the back end of our podcast that I call our speed round, and it's all about emotions because I love to talk about emotions being at the root and core of the things that we do. So basically, we're going to ask about your go-to emotions when things are going well, and your limiting emotions when things are going poorly. And I'll give you some categories, and then we'll just kind of jump through them. Yeah. So the first category is business. So when things are going well in business, what's your go-to emotion?
Things are going well in business. Excitement.
Awesome. And when things are going poorly, what's your limiting go-to emotion?
Either confusion or depression.
And in partnerships, when things are going well, what's your go-to emotion? Business partnerships, particularly.
Business partnerships. I would say it's like an energy, like a vibrancy.
Cool. And you're limiting when things are going poorly.
Agitation, frustration. Yeah.
Okay. And you do a lot of coaching and you work with a lot of people. So when you are the coach and you're working with somebody and things are going well, what's your go-to emotion?
Say like hopeful or enlivened, refreshed kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And when things are going poorly, what's your limiting emotion?
And it's interesting because when we're coaching people, I mean, there's no good or bad. It's just going as is. And I have been there. And the emotion is, I think it's like a sadness. Yeah.
No, I totally get that. What about on the other side of coaching when you're being coached? Because I know we all have our coaches and our mentors, and I think it's necessary. So when you're being coached and things are going well, what's your go-to emotion?
Yeah, I think it's like a joyful, and same with that, like kind of like upbeat. Yeah.
And when things are going poorly, when you're being coached, what's your limiting emotion?
I mean, that I think it depends on the situation. It could be anywhere from frustration, embarrassment, confusion. Yeah.
And in relationships, in your relationship, when things are going well, what's your go-to emotion?
Warmth. And I mean, love is described as emotion. I think love is just such a loaded term, so we're not going to use that today.
Cool.
But I do recommend our listeners check out the book Love 2.0 by Barbara Fredrickson to get a new definition of love, which is awesome. So I'm going to talk about warmth. Yeah.
And when things are going poorly, what's the limiting emotion?
Oh, agitation. That same agitation. Just, we talk about these nice feelings where it's definitely this nice tightness in my chest and a clenching of my jaw. That is my go-to.
Yeah. And that's it for the speed round. Thank you so much for sharing all that with us. It's always great when I feel like we can get our entrepreneurs to hear that they're in the same position. We are all human. We all have these experiences, and it's good and it's okay to have them. And we need to learn how to manage, control, and execute them better. And it's a journey, and so it's great to be able to hear others that are successful at doing the thing they're doing, knowing that we all go through very similar things, and we're all human. Imagine that.
Imagine that. We have this amazing human technology called feelings/emotions that have existed in our bodies for millions of years that point to what's really important to me right now. It's like a flag that goes off that's saying something is not working or something is working really well. It's pretty amazing.
Awesome. Well, you know what? I appreciate you joining us today. You are always a pleasure to talk to, and I'm so thankful to have you as a friend and acquaintance. In such a short time, I feel like we've gotten to know each other great, and I hope the audience feels like they have gotten to know you too, because you're a great guy and you have so many awesome things to offer. And so on that note, what are some ways for our audience to get in touch with you and find the stuff and the work that you've been up to and that you've been doing?
A great way to check me out is the Mindful Communication podcast, where I talk to experts, thinkers, influencers all around the art and science of connection. So once you're down listening to all the episodes of Magic for Life, then you can listen to my podcast, find lots of great nuggets there. You can also go to my website, mindfulcommunication.me. You'll include in the show notes 2 amazing resources there. One is a free 4-part video training series on how to transform any and all conflicts. It's really awesome. There's email follow-ups, really solidifies the learnings. I do recommend checking that out. And then the second resource is this Tough Talks Made Easy conflict assessment tool. So if today didn't give you enough nuggets to handle that tough conversation that you've been avoiding, what you can do is you can book 45 minutes with me. We'll go over your situation, come up with a game plan, a roadmap on how to have that difficult conversation in a natural and powerful way for you, with confidence, with ease. And you can use the promo code MAJIC, MAJIC 50 for 50% off the tool. So you can stop avoiding that tough conversation and find that peace that you're looking for in that relationship.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for doing that for our listeners. And guys, you need to go take advantage of all this stuff that he has made available for you, because for goodness sakes, we need to work on our communication. We need to work on our conflict resolution abilities and skill set. It is a skill. It's something you practice, and it's something that Jonathan can help you get better at. So go look him up, go find the stuff. We'll put the links in the description so that you can find them easier. And thank you so much, Jonathan, for joining us today. You're awesome.
It was a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Bye-bye.
Hey, lifers, don't forget to get your free copy of the Every Minute Book. You can find it at everyminutebook.com. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Instagram.